Yo, what's up, chefs? It's Vinny, and welcome to my top 10 tips to having a successful league start video. The first 5 tips are going to be more big picture, macro level thinking, trying to get you in the right mindset, and the next 5 are going to be specific to your first character, getting through the campaign and early end game as smooth as possible. For those of you that are new to the channel, just to provide a little bit of context, I played throughout the entirety of the first league. I have about 700 hours played time in game, with at least another 500 plus, just amassing a massive amount of information, doing research, making build guides, etc. I cleared and tested all of the hardest content in the game, made over half a thousand divine orbs, and yeah, with that being said, I'm not like the #1 POE expert, obviously, so do with that what you will. But I did put a lot of time into these tips, and I think they're going to be quite helpful to most players, particularly if you're not a #1 expert yourself. So let's get started. Kicking things off with the 5 big picture macro level tips, and first up is going to be to have your essentials. By that, I'm talking about your loot filter, price checker, path to building, and the best online resources to answer any questions you might end up having while you're playing. Some of these are going to be things that you really just need for Path of Exile in general, but if you're returning for the start of the new league, some of them are things you may need to get re-downloaded, things of that nature, reconfigured, all that good stuff. The newer of a player you are, the more value you're likely to get from using a price checker, and the more long-term value you're going to get from starting to use Path of Building and really understand the inner workings of the game. I've also got a full video going over all of these things in detail, how to get them downloaded, a little tutorial on each of them, how to use them, all that good stuff. I'll include a link to that in the description. And in the description of that video, you'll be able to find links to everything you need. All of the best online resources, loot filter, price checker, path of building, everything. So feel free to use that if you'd like to, and let's keep going. Tip number 2 is going to be to pre-plan your build. Now, there are some obvious caveats here. We don't have all of the information on the new support gems, descriptions for the hunter skills, and a plethora of other things. I'm aware. With that being said, I still think it's a good idea to come in to the league with a plan, especially for your leveling path, and even more importantly, like Act 1. You know, what class are you going to play? What ascendancy do you have in mind to go later on? But then in Act 1, what are you going to do for your skill gems? I could tell you off the top of my head, if I wasn't starting Huntress, I know I could start Ranger, Lightning Arrow from the first chest in the starter zone, Contagion from Renly in the town, Frost Bomb from Clearfell, Lightning Rod, Stormcaller Arrow, Martial Tempo and Stormcaller Arrow with Scattershot for clear, swap Scattershot with Concentrated Effect for bosses. You get the picture. I have an idea, like a plan, a step-by-step for the first couple of acts and what I could level with. I think this is pretty valuable, although you should have some willingness to adapt even your starting plan if you see good support gems or interactions that seem like they would be really good. But having something to fall back on that you know is going to get you through the first couple of acts, I think is quite valuable. Especially Act 1, you know, the more of a beginner you are, the more Act 1 is going to be like a barrier to entry, basically, because honestly, once you get out of Act 1 in SSF, like, it usually feels very, very smooth. I'm not exactly sure, you know, why that is. Maybe they'll make some adjustments to the skill gem scaling that helps with that. But for right now, as it stands, Act 1 is going to be a bit of a difficult one, especially given all the nerfs. Tip number 3 is going to be to not waste time and or currency in the campaign, or even the early end game for that matter, if you can help it. Now, of course, you should strike a balance here between this and having fun, and you should do that at your own discretion. With that being said, if you're trying to have a successful league start, here's what I think you should know. In the campaign, you should feel somewhat free to use transmutes, augments, and regals, with good reason, of course. You should be looking to use Artificer's Orbs in combination with flat damage runes in your weapons at different breakpoints in the campaign. And for the most part, the majority of other currency, I would be quite cautious when thinking about using it in the campaign. Just as an easy example, the value you're going to get from slamming 5 Exalted Orbs throughout the campaign is going to pale in comparison to what you would get from 5 Exalted Orbs one day into the league if you were to trade for items at level 75. So just something to keep in mind. In addition to that, I wouldn't spend too much time in the campaign or early endgame hyper-focused on optimizing your build. You don't need a perfect build to get through the campaign and to start mapping, and ultimately your goal should be to get to endgame as quickly as possible to start interacting with the Atlas and other endgame activities. The amount of currency you make in this game is exponential related to the amount of power your character has, so the more time and the quicker you can just move your character forward and actually progress as opposed to sitting still, mulling over about a certain support gem, this or that in Act 3 when it doesn't really matter, the better. So do with that what you will. Like I said, you need to strike a balance between this and having fun, but if you're trying to have a successful league start, you should be going forward as much as possible. Tip number 4 is going to be to pick a currency farming method. To be specific, I think you're going to need to wait a couple of days, maybe even a week, before you really want to commit to a certain one, just so that way you have some time to test out the new endgame mechanics, systems, all of that good stuff, and do some research on what people seem to think is good. But once you've gotten that taken care of, I do think it's valuable to try and pick a specific method and hone your ability to do that to a very high degree. So for example, if you want to farm Trial of the Secamus, you should try and figure out what the best relic combination is, do your research on that, watch a Trial of the Secamus guide. At that point, maybe even try and create a second build that is really hyper focused on farming Trial of the Secamus very quickly. And then at that point, just understand your market. What's going to be the best way to make currency from that? Is it going to be doing against the darkness runs? Should you be selling them unidentified or gambling them out and, waiting for a big ticket? Are you doing a relic farm strategy instead of against the darkness, etc., etc.? And this is, all encompassing to a plethora of different currency farming methods. Maybe you want to be a profit crafter. Maybe you want to figure out how to do fracturing, all of these different things. But I think if you hone in on one and you fully understand the market, you'll be able to figure out where there are kind of like discrepancies. I don't think discrepancies is the right word I'm looking for, but you'll be able to figure out where there are opportunities in the market to make the most money. Tip number 5 is going to slightly contradict tip number 4, but I think it's really just what you should do in advance of picking a currency farming method, and that's going to be to engage with new mechanics and endgame systems, or at least do your research on them. I think the value here is that it's very likely, given the scope of just how much is getting added to the game with this patch, that there's bound to be some things that are going to be extremely strong, like build-defining uniques, maybe some extremely special boss drop uniques in the deep end game. Fracturing orbs might be extremely strong. There's just an infinite number of options here. And I would say, especially given the fact that so much was nerfed, I think it's very likely that there will be some massive opportunities to make really good currency with some of the things that are being added. So before you fully lock in to a specific currency farming method, you should at least do research on the new stuff, things that other people are testing out, before you make your decision. Moving on to the next 5 tips, and these are going to be more specifically focused to the campaign and leveling process on your first character, things I learned from watching the POE 2 races and just doing my own league start practice over the last week or so. Starting off with tip number 6, and this is going to be like 3 helpful resources combined into this one tip. I'm going to try and rapid fire through some of these last tips just to not waste any of your guys' time, since I know some of y'all are probably watching after the launch of the league. But for tip number 6, like I said, it's going to be 3 separate resources, starting off with permanent stats from the campaign. You can find links for all of these in the description. This is going to show you where to get all of the permanent buffs throughout the campaign. So your spirit, passive skill, weapon points, like weapon swap points, the resistance. A good example where a lot of people miss out on this is in Act 2, getting the lightning resistance. I've had a lot of people tell me that they didn't know this was a thing because it's not very apparent. You don't get like a pop-up on your screen when you grab it. It just has a chat notification, so you'd have to be looking at your chat window. After that, there's the campaign walkthrough, another max roll link. This is going to help you if if you don't remember the campaign that well, maybe you've taken a break from the game. This is going to be quite helpful. It's going to tell you which direction to go, what zone to go, what side quests are going to be worth doing, things of that nature. And then finally, we have a campaign layout. This is going to be on Mobalytics. They have one for Act 1, 2, and 3, so obviously you can use that again for the Cruel Axe as well. This is if you're really trying to like speed run or just improve your efficiency. This is going to be very helpful. Show you exactly which direction to go within each of the zones individually. Tip number 7 is going to be to make use of the vendors. The vendors refresh their stock every time you level, and in specific across the board for all builds, you should be looking for movement speed on your boots. The earlier you get this, the better, and of course, depending on your build, there's a plethora of other things that are very valuable. If you're playing minions, plus level to minions on your helmet as an example. If you're playing an attack-focused build, upgrading your weapon every so often, like every 10 levels or so. Getting things that add damage to attacks on your gloves, rings, amulet. There's just an infinite number of options here, really depending on your build, but the vendor is very, very strong. The Regex I'm going to be using for my Huntress at League Start should be popping up on screen. This is going to help me find movement speed on my boots, anything that adds damage to attacks, anything with quality, sockets, or maximum life. So when I visit the vendor, which will be quite often, I'll be using this Regex first, and then I might just search for rares in general and look at those as well. Tip number 8 is going to be to pick up everything, especially early on in the campaign, but I'm going to be a little bit more specific, and this is my general priority whenever I've been doing my League Start practice recently. So first is going to be to bring things to the salvage bench. Obviously, if it has quality or sockets, that's going to the salvage bench. The armor scraps, blacksmith whetstones, and artificer orbs are just too valuable early on. Next is going to be to sell things for gold. Specifically, rare items you should always identify before selling. You're going to get way more than 25 extra gold for identifying it once you do when you sell it. And the reason I use 25 is because that's the cost of a scroll of wisdom very early on. But long story short, always identify your rares. Starting off at like level 10 to 15, you should always be identifying your magics too, and by that point you should have access to the hooded one, so you can just identify your entire inventory for free, then sell everything, collect the gold, and the gold is obviously going to be very useful for the regular vendors, and if you really know what you're doing, you can use it to gamble at certain breakpoints for trying to get specific unique items. And then finally, after that, it's going to be to disenchant for certain types of currency shards. Really, particularly early on, you don't do this that often, I don't think, because you really need the gold. But as you start to just have like a plethora of golds where you can't really run out that easily, then you can start disenchanting for the regal shards, transmute shards, augment shards, things of that nature. But honestly, those aren't super valuable unless they're coming from the salvage bench. Technically, the regal shards are like kind of valuable, but they're not going to make nearly as big of a difference as selling things for gold early on to use from the vendors. Tip number 9 is going to be to dump and go. This is going to be helpful for the end game and the leveling process, but in specific, if you're trying to improve the speed at which you get through the campaign, you should be trying to spend as little time in the town as physically possible. If you watch the POE 2 races that happened recently, I think you would be very shocked to see just how little time these people are spending in town, how much of what they're doing in between zones, or like even while they're running through a zone, they're going through their inventory, they're upgrading their items, they're, organizing. It's very, very nice to watch. But realistically, even in the end game, like I said, you should be spending as little time in the town or hideout as physically possible. Whenever you need to come back, your inventory is full. You should instantly identify everything at the hooded one. And if you're in the campaign, you should just go straight to a vendor, or you should go straight to the salvage bench. Salvage if you have any sockets or quality items. After that, you should go straight to the vendor. Quickly glance through everything. If it's not obviously an upgrade, just sell it and move on. And just to elaborate on the end game implication of this, you should ideally have some dump tabs set up in your stash ready to go. So that way, whenever you come out of a map, you can instantly identify everything from the hooded one and then just slap everything into that dump tab. Once the dump tab starts to fill up, you can go through it all at once, determine if anything's going to be of value that you might want to sell or slam with exalts, etc., whatever you want to do with it. And then everything else should either get disenchanted if you have a ton of gold at this point already, or you should just go ahead and sell it, or some things like breach rings, things of that nature, you should hold on to if you want to reforge them and 3-to-1. And finally, tip number 10 is kind of going to be like 2 alternative tips. The first one is going to be for everyone, and the second one is going to be if you're in the small group of people that are watching this before the league actually launched. So I'm going to start off with the one for everyone, and that's going to be that during the campaign, at least in my personal opinion, you should be focusing on damage kind of above everything else. This isn't to say that defenses are like useless or that you should just be negligent towards them, but I would not be focusing on getting defensive stuff in my passive tree pretty much whatsoever while leveling up. I'm going damage, 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 attack speed, damage, things of that nature. I'm also skipping out on jewel sockets unless I have any useful jewels in my stash early on until I can trade for them. But generally speaking, I'm getting like 0 defensive nodes early on. Also, movement speed, if you're starting in the Huntress or Ranger section, getting movement speed nodes is going to be very valuable. Even if you don't keep them in your like end game version of the build, getting them while leveling up is going to be quite nice.
You will never leave this place. Right of the full moon. Draven, I need you.
And that's going to conclude the video. And it kind of goes without saying, but you should be having fun as your #1 priority, like above everything else. At the end of the day, it is a video game. If you're having fun, you're going to be playing the game for longer. You're going to want to improve. I promise you, having fun is actually the #1 thing that's going to result in you improving at the game, having a better league start for 0.3, for example. So definitely have fun over everything else. You don't have to take the game super seriously. You paid for it. Do what you want with your time. With all that being said, it is April 4th, so happy League launch day, everyone. I'll be seeing you on stream here in a couple of hours, and I appreciate the support, guys. Take it easy, chefs. And last but not least, take it easy, chefs.
Watch your blue eyes fade to gray as you fade away. As you fade away.